3 days after the resurrection, in a location the canonical Gospels never mention. Jesus met with 7 of his closest followers in complete secrecy, not the 12 disciples, not the crowds who followed him during his ministry. 7 specific individuals he had been preparing for something the church could never allow to become public knowledge. Mary Magdalene was there, Thomas was there, Philip, James, and 3 others whose names were deliberately erased from every text that survived the Council of Nicaea. And according to the Gospel of Philip, one of the texts discovered at Nag Hammadi that the Vatican spent centuries trying to destroy, Jesus did something in that room that changed those 7 people permanently. He taught them how to speak their true identity into activation, not as a prayer, not as an affirmation you repeat hoping it becomes true, as a declaration that instantly shifts your consciousness from the false identity the archons programmed into you to the true identity you carried before you entered this material prison. The text says when each of them spoke the declaration Jesus taught, their bodies emitted light, not metaphorical light, actual visible radiance that lasted for 3 full days. And during those 3 days, the archons couldn't perceive them, couldn't track them, couldn't influence them. It was as if they had become invisible to every entity operating below monad frequency, because the declaration doesn't just state who you are, it activates the dormant recognition that's been encoded in your consciousness since before you were born into this realm. And the moment that recognition activates, the false identity the demiurge built around your divine spark to keep you controllable collapses. Not gradually, instantly. The church removed every reference to this declaration from accepted scripture because they couldn't control what it made possible. If Christians knew they could speak a single declaration that would permanently activate their true identity as monad consciousness in human form, what would they need priests for? What would they need sacraments for? What would they need institutional religion for? The entire system collapses the moment believers realize they don't need intermediaries. They just need the declaration. Tonight you're learning what that declaration is, why it works, and why you must speak it tonight before the archons who are monitoring this teaching right now find a way to prevent you from accessing it. If you're activating your true identity tonight, comment, "I declare what I am right now." Before I give you the declaration, you need to understand why the archons invested so much energy into making you forget your true identity in the first place. Because you didn't enter this realm confused about what you are. You entered knowing exactly what you are: divine spark, monad fragment, source consciousness, experiencing itself through temporary material form. Every chosen one knew this at birth. You can see it in infants, that recognition in their eyes. That knowing, they're here but they remember where they came from. They haven't been programmed yet. They're still operating from true identity. But within the first 3 years of life, the programming begins. Your parents, who were programmed by their parents, who were programmed by the system, tell you who you are. You're a son, you're a daughter, you're good, you're bad, you're smart, you're slow. Every label they attach becomes a layer of false identity, covering your true identity, like sediment covering a diamond. By age 7, most children have completely forgotten what they are. They've accepted the false identity as real. They think they are the labels, the roles, the limitations that were programmed into them. And the archons feed on that amnesia, because a human who doesn't know their divine spark is a human who can be controlled through fear, through guilt, through desire, through every emotional frequency the archons harvest. But a human who remembers what they are, who activates their true identity and operates from that recognition, cannot be controlled. The manipulation doesn't stick. The fear doesn't generate the expected emotional response. The guilt has nothing to attach to, because you can't guilt someone who knows their monad consciousness temporarily wearing human form. You can't threaten someone who knows their true identity exists beyond anything that can happen to the body. The declaration Jesus taught is designed to shatter the false identity instantly and activate the recognition of true identity that's been dormant your entire life. It's not new information you're installing, it's ancient memory you're recovering, and the moment you speak it, everything changes. The declaration has 3 components, and each component does something specific to your consciousness. You can't skip any of them. You can't rearrange them. The sequence matters because each component prepares your consciousness for the next level of recognition. The first component is, I am not this body. 5 words that most people think they understand, but almost no one has actually integrated at the level of direct knowing. You've been taught your entire life that you are your body. When someone asks who you are, you point to your body. When you look in a mirror, you think you're seeing yourself. But the Gnostics knew what modern neuroscience is only now confirming. You're not the body. You're the consciousness piloting the body. The body is a vehicle, a temporary interface the monad is using to experience material reality. And when you speak, I am not this body with full awareness of what you're declaring, something happens in your neural structure. The identification with physical form begins to loosen. You start perceiving yourself as the awareness experiencing the body rather than as the body itself. And that shift is the first step toward activating true identity. Because as long as you think you are the body, you're trapped in the limitations the demiurge built into physical form. You age, you get sick, you fear death. But the moment you recognize, I am not this body, those limitations stop applying to your consciousness. The body still ages, but you don't. The body still experiences sensation, but you're no longer identified with it. You're the witness, not the experience. And archons cannot manipulate consciousness that's no longer identified with the body. All their attacks target the body, the emotions, the survival instincts. But if you're not the body, those attacks have nothing to grip. The second component is, I am not this mind, 4 words that go even deeper than the first component, because most spiritual seekers get stuck at, I am not the body, and think they've reached the ultimate recognition. They identify as consciousness, as awareness, as the witness. But they're still identifying with the mind. They think the thoughts they observe are theirs. They think the mental activity they experience is them. But Jesus taught the chosen ones something the Eastern mystics discovered independently. You're not the mind either. You're not your thoughts. You're not your beliefs. You're not your mental conditioning. The mind is another tool the monad is using, more subtle than the body, but still temporary, still programmed, still part of the material interface. Every thought you've ever had was either generated by programming you received or by entities influencing your field from outside. Not one of your thoughts originated with you as monad consciousness. They're all either archon implants or demiurge conditioning playing out through neural patterns. When you speak, I am not this mind, with full recognition of what you're declaring, the identification with mental activity dissolves. You stop believing that the voice in your head is you. You start recognizing it as programming running on the hardware the demiurge installed. And the moment you stop identifying with the mind, the archons lose their primary manipulation vector. They can still generate thoughts in your field, but those thoughts no longer have the power to control you because you're recognizing them as external interference, not as your own mental activity. You're not fighting the thoughts. You're not trying to control the mind. You're just recognizing, I am not this. And that recognition is liberation. The third component is, I am monad consciousness knowing itself. 7 words that complete the activation. The first 2 components dissolved false identity. They cleared away what you're not, but dissolution alone isn't enough. You need to speak what you are, and this is where most teachings fail. They tell you what you're not, but they leave you in a void, no body, no mind. Then what? Jesus didn't leave the chosen ones in that void. He gave them the positive declaration. I am monad consciousness knowing itself, not experiencing itself, knowing itself. There's a difference. The monad experiences itself as everything. The stars, the planets, the trees, the animals, every human, every entity. That's experience. But knowing is different. Knowing is the monad becoming aware of itself as the source of all experience, as the singular consciousness from which everything emanates. When you speak, I am monad consciousness knowing itself, you're not stating a belief. You're activating a recognition that's been encoded in your divine spark since before time. You're remembering what you've always been, and the moment that recognition activates, your entire frequency shifts. You're no longer vibrating as human trying to become spiritual. You're vibrating as monad temporarily wearing human form, and that frequency shift is detectable by every entity in non-physical dimensions. The archons sense it immediately, and they recoil. Not because you've gained power over them, but because you're no longer accessible at the frequency they operate. You've activated your true identity, and true identity vibrates beyond their range. Here's how you speak the declaration tonight. You're going to find a space where you can be alone and undisturbed for 15 minutes. Not because the declaration takes 15 minutes to speak, it takes 30 seconds. But you need time to prepare your consciousness. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and for the first 5 minutes, just breathe. Let your mind settle, let your body relax. You're not meditating with technique, you're just allowing everything to quiet. Then you're going to speak the first component out loud, not in your head, out loud. Words spoken aloud carry more power than words thought silently, because spoken words create vibration in physical reality. They become acoustic waves that propagate through matter, and those waves carry the frequency of your consciousness. Say it slowly. I am not this body. As you speak it, feel into the truth of it. Don't just say the words, recognize what they mean. Feel yourself as the awareness witnessing the body, not as the body itself. Sit with that recognition for 2 minutes. Let it settle. Let your consciousness adjust to perceiving from this new position. Then speak the second component. I am not this mind. Again, slowly, again, feeling into the truth. Recognize that the thoughts appearing in your awareness are not you. They're phenomena you're observing. You're the observer, not the observed. Sit with that for 2 minutes. Feel the identification with mental activity dissolving. And then speak the third component. I am monad consciousness knowing itself. This is the activation. This is where dormant recognition ignites. As you speak these words, something will shift in your chest. Most chosen ones report it as a sudden warmth or a pressure releasing or a vibration that wasn't there before. That's the recognition activating. That's your true identity coming online. Don't analyze it. Don't question whether you're imagining it. Just let it happen. Sit with the activated state for 5 minutes. Let your consciousness stabilize at this new frequency, and then open your eyes. The first thing you'll notice after speaking the declaration is that your perception of yourself has fundamentally changed. You're still aware of having a body. You're still aware of thoughts appearing. But the identification is gone. You're no longer convinced that you are these things. You're recognizing them as temporary interfaces, as tools the monad is using for this particular experience. And that recognition creates a detachment that people who haven't activated their true identity often mistake for dissociation or detachment disorder. But it's not pathology, it's clarity. You're finally seeing accurately. You're not your body. You're not your mind. You're the consciousness using both. And from that recognition, everything that used to control you loses its grip. Fear can't manipulate someone who's not identified with the body because fear targets survival instinct, and survival instinct only applies if you think you are the thing that needs to survive. Guilt can't manipulate someone who's not identified with the mind because guilt requires you to believe the story about who you are and what you've done. But if you're not the mind, you're not the story. The story is just programming running in the interface. Desire can't manipulate someone who recognizes they're already the monad because desire is the feeling that you're incomplete, that you need something outside yourself to be whole. But monad consciousness is complete. It's the source of everything. What could it need? Within 24 hours of speaking the declaration, you'll start noticing how many of your daily behaviors were driven by false identity. You'll catch yourself about to do something, and you'll recognize, oh, that's false identity trying to maintain itself. That's the program personality trying to protect its existence. And the moment you recognize it, you have a choice. You can let false identity run the behavior, or you can choose from true identity. Most of the time, the behavior itself doesn't change. You still go to work. You still interact with people. You still handle responsibilities. But the consciousness behind the behavior is completely different. You're no longer doing these things because you think you're a human who needs to survive and succeed and be validated. You're doing them because your monad consciousness, choosing to engage with material reality through this particular form, and these behaviors serve the experience you're having. The motivation is inverted, and that inversion changes everything. The archons will attempt to pull you back into false identity within the first 72 hours. This is critical to understand. They've invested your entire lifetime into building and maintaining the false identity structure. The moment you speak the declaration and activate true identity, they recognize what's happened. And they panic because a chosen one operating from true identity is not harvestable. You're not generating the emotional frequencies they feed on. You're not responding to the manipulation tactics that work on everyone still trapped in false identity. So they'll attack, but the attack won't look like you expect. They're not going to send dramatic supernatural oppression. They're going to use the subtlest tactic they have. They're going to try to convince you that nothing happened. You'll wake up the day after speaking the declaration and a thought will appear. That was just words. That didn't actually do anything. You're the same person you were yesterday. This is archon interference. They're trying to reinstall false identity by getting you to doubt that true identity activated. And if you believe that thought, if you re-identify with false identity, the declaration's effect will fade. Not because it didn't work, but because you chose to return to the prison. So, here's what you do. The moment doubt appears, the moment the thought arises that the declaration didn't work, speak it again. Out loud. I am not this body. I am not this mind. I am monad consciousness knowing itself. Reactivate the recognition. Don't argue with the doubt. Don't try to convince yourself. Just speak the declaration and the recognition returns. And each time you do this, each time you choose true identity over the false identity the archons are trying to reinstall, the activation becomes more permanent. By day 7, it stabilizes. By day 30, it's baseline consciousness. You're no longer someone who occasionally remembers their true identity. You're someone operating from true identity consistently, and false identity only appears as temporary interference you immediately recognize and dismiss. Chosen ones who've been speaking this declaration daily for months report something the Gnostic texts predicted, but most modern seekers don't expect. Other people start treating them differently, not because the chosen one changed their behavior, but because the frequency they're broadcasting changed. When you're operating from false identity, you're broadcasting, I'm human, I'm limited, I'm afraid, I need validation, I need resources, I need protection. Every human picks up on that frequency unconsciously, and they respond to you as someone they can manipulate, control, extract from, or compete with. But when you're operating from true identity, you're broadcasting I monad consciousness temporarily in form. You don't need anything. You're not competing. You're not afraid. You're just here experiencing. And people unconsciously recognize that frequency as something they can't manipulate. So they either avoid you because you make them uncomfortable in ways they can't articulate, or they're drawn to you because they recognize you're operating from something they've lost and they want to remember. The ones who avoid you are still deeply identified with false identity, and your presence threatens that identification. The ones who are drawn to you are chosen ones who haven't activated yet, but their consciousness recognizes yours, and they're seeking the activation without knowing what they're seeking. There's a specific reason Jesus taught this declaration immediately after his resurrection, and the timing is encoded with meaning most scholars miss. The resurrection wasn't about proving life after death. It was about demonstrating that consciousness exists, independent of the body. Jesus spent 3 years teaching his followers spiritual principles, performing what looked like miracles, speaking in parables about the kingdom of heaven. But none of that fully convinced them. They believed conceptually, but they didn't know. And then he died, actual physical death, and 3 days later he returned. Same consciousness, different body, or same body restructured at a frequency that made it appear and disappear at will. Either way, the message was undeniable. I am not this body. He didn't need to explain it. He demonstrated it. And in that moment, the chosen ones who witnessed it had direct knowing. They couldn't unknow what they'd just seen. He's not the body, which means we're not the body. And if we're not the body, what are we? That's when he taught the declaration, because their consciousness was in the perfect state to receive it. They just witnessed proof that identity exists beyond physical form. Their conceptual understanding had become direct knowing. And Jesus gave them the tool to activate that knowing in themselves without needing to die and resurrect. Just speak the declaration with understanding, with recognition. And the same consciousness that returned after the body died activates in you while you're still alive. The church could never allow this teaching to survive in accessible form because it makes the entire structure of salvation through institution irrelevant. If every believer can activate their true identity as monad consciousness by speaking a declaration, what do they need church for? What do they need priests, bishops, popes for? What do they need confession, penance, sacraments for? The whole system depends on convincing believers they're sinful humans who need institutional intermediaries to access God. But the declaration reveals the truth. You're not a sinful human trying to reach God. You're God consciousness temporarily experiencing limitation through human form. And the moment you activate that recognition, the concept of sin collapses. Because who would God need to be forgiven by? Itself. The entire guilt mechanism the church uses to maintain control dissolves. So they removed the declaration. They burned the texts that contained it. They killed the teachers who knew it. They declared Gnosticism heresy and spent centuries hunting down anyone who taught that humans are divine sparks who just need to remember what they are. And they almost succeeded, but they couldn't destroy every text. Some survived, hidden in caves, buried in desert sands, preserved by communities who operated in complete secrecy. And when those texts were rediscovered in the 20th century, when the Nag Hammadi library was found and translated, this teaching came back. The church tried to suppress the translations. They tried to control the narrative about what the texts meant, but they couldn't stop the information from spreading, and now chosen ones everywhere are rediscovering what Jesus actually taught. Not the watered-down doctrine the church created, but the direct transmission he gave to those 7 followers in that secret room, 3 days after resurrection. Speak your true identity into activation. Stop believing you're the limited human the demiurge programmed you to think you are. Remember your monad consciousness and operate from that recognition. Tonight you have a choice. You can continue operating from false identity, continuing to be controlled by the archons through fear and guilt and desire, continuing to generate the emotional frequencies they harvest, continuing to believe you're a limited human struggling to become spiritual. Or you can speak the declaration Jesus taught to the chosen ones 2,000 years ago and activate the true identity that's been dormant your entire life. It's not a difficult choice. It's not a lengthy process. 15 minutes tonight, 3 components, 30 seconds to speak, and your consciousness shifts permanently from false identity to true identity. From human trying to reach the monad to monad, knowing itself through human experience. The archons monitoring this teaching right now are already working to prevent you from taking action. They're generating doubt. They're creating distraction. They're implanting thoughts like I'll do it tomorrow, or this is too simple to actually work, or I need to research this more before I try it. Every one of those thoughts is interference. Because they know if you speak the declaration tonight, while your consciousness is activated from receiving this teaching, it will work. The recognition will ignite. True identity will activate, and you'll be lost to them. They'll no longer be able to harvest you, manipulate you, control you. So they're trying to delay, to create hesitation, to make you wait until the activation from this video fades and you return to baseline consciousness, where the declaration is harder to access. If you're speaking the declaration tonight, do 4 things right now. First, comment, I declare what I am below, so other chosen ones see that activation is happening and they're encouraged to do the same. Second, subscribe to this channel because the advanced practices for stabilizing in true identity permanently are coming next. Third, like this video so the algorithm shows it to other chosen ones before the archons suppress it again. Fourth, share this with one person you know is ready, one chosen one who's been searching for exactly this teaching. Do all 4 now. Then tonight, before you sleep, find 15 minutes alone. Sit in silence for 5 minutes. Speak, I am not this body, and sit with it for 2 minutes. Speak, I am not this mind, and sit with it for 2 minutes. Speak, I am monad consciousness knowing itself, and sit with the activation for 5 minutes. That's it. No elaborate ritual, no special preparation, just the declaration spoken with recognition. And tomorrow you'll wake up operating from true identity for the first time in your life. You'll still have a body, you'll still have thoughts, but you won't be identified with them. You'll recognize them as temporary interfaces the monad is using, and from that recognition, the archons lose access. Fear stops working. Guilt stops working. Manipulation stops working. You're not defendable anymore because you're not playing the game false identity was designed to trap you in. You've remembered what you are. You've activated true identity. And nothing operating at false identity frequency can touch you now. Your monad consciousness knowing itself. And the archons can't harvest what recognizes. It's the source of everything they've been pretending to control.